Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today with some Slimline Landscape Village cards featuring Lawn Fawn stamps and dies. Lawn Fawn recently came out with 3 new die collections perfect for creating all kinds of long or short and long or tall and skinny card designs. I'll be using a couple of the other new products from this mini release, Village Heroes and the Car Critters stamps and coordinating dies to create these fun scene cards. For the first card, we are going to be creating a card that covers the entire front of a card base. So these long or short and long designs, I guess I want to say, are 3 1/4 by 8 1/2 inches long. To create the background for the first card, I'm using the large rectangle from the large Slimline with Sliders die collection, die cut from Hero Hue's Mist cardstock, Meadow cardstock, Lawn Fawn Noble Fur cardstock, and then from the 2 green cardstock panels, I'm going to be die cutting with the Slimline stitched hillside borders to create those hilly backgrounds. Using the previously released road border, I'm going to die cut this twice from Black Licorice and Sunflower Lawn Fawn cardstocks. Because these dies were made to work with a traditional A2 sized card, I'm going to need 2 of them. I'm going to go ahead and layer these together with the black on top of the yellow and then piece them together to go across the front of my cards. To disguise where these 2 panels or these 2 strips meet, I will be using an additional image, which I'll share a little bit later in the assembly of this card so that it's not quite so visible. Let's go ahead and completely assemble the die cut background before we stamp and color all of the cute little images for this card. Using the road border, I'm simply going to place this across the design, making sure I leave room for my sentiments that I'm going to stamp in the lower right corner. After I've pieced together the road, I can go ahead and assemble the borders for the background, starting with my darker green border first, and then the lighter green border with the road. This stitched panel that comes in the large Slimline with Sliders collection measures 3 1/2 inches by 8 1/2 inches, meaning it's going to completely cover the front of a short and short and long card. I'll trim away the rest of the road, and then I'm going to line up my sentiments from the Village Hero stamp set in that lower right corner of our card panel. I'm using both the thank you sentiment and for all you do sentiment lined up together to make a long skinny greeting. I'm stamping these with some Lawn Fawn clear embossing ink, and then I will heat emboss with white embossing powder. I find it's easier to do this with a few less things on the panel for the embossing powder to get stuck to. I used a powder tool to help keep the embossing powder only on the stamped greeting. Once I have heat set my sentiment, I want to make sure and buff away any of that excess powder to get rid of that kind of chalkboard look that's in the background. Make sure you let the embossing powder dry or cool, all the way first so that you don't smear the hot embossing powder on your design. Next, I have already stamped off camera a bunch of images, not only from the brand new Village Hero stamp set, but also from the Happy Village stamp set. I'll add color to my images with Copic markers. I made sure to use an ink that works great for Copic coloring. Lawn Fawn has this awesome jet black ink. It's been out for a while that works great with Copic markers. Across the top of the screen, I've listed the colors of Copic markers I'm using to color in each area. I started with the images you see here, but in the finished card, there are a few additional images, including an ice cream truck and a bench that are from the Village Shops stamp set, and a cute little dog from the Tiny Christmas stamp set. I love being able to go back through and do what I call shop your stash to find more stamps that might reinforce and work with the stamp set or dies that you're using for the current card. In this case, Lawn Fawn has added to their Village collection, which already has Happy Village and the Village Shops, as well as a Halloween set. So there's lots and lots of options. And now they have the Heroes set, the Village Heroes. So this is so much fun. My card is definitely full of lots and lots of images. The most time-consuming part of this card was coloring in everything. I have sped it up quite a bit in the video just to save you some time, but still left this in the video because I know so many of you really enjoy the coloring part of the videos. I love that you can use the images from the Village Heroes all together, like I'm doing on this card here, which has like the school bus and the schoolhouse go together, the ambulance and the hospital, and so on and so forth. And then you can mix and match with the previous sets that are already out, or you could totally break these apart and create individual cards. So for example, the hospital and the ambulance would be fantastic for as a thank you for doctors or nurses, the school images for teachers, just really awesome to use in all kinds of different ways. I definitely went kind of what I like to call over the top probably by mixing and matching so many, but the slimline dies really allow you so much more real estate to create fun little scenes. And these images are relatively small. So it's a really good one. If you want to kind of create this elaborate scene, you totally can. My first card has a lot of images. It has all of these plus a few additional ones. My second card will have a few less. It still has a lot more. That long real estate still allows me to be able to do something a little bit more of an extended scene, if you will, but it doesn't have quite as much coloring as this one. We're going to continue to color all of these little parts and pieces. I had started like trying to color everything that was I knew for sure was going to be green and whatever, and then red, and I decided I will just kind of work my way down my piece of paper here to hopefully make it go a little quicker and also kind of tie in what colors I'm using for each individual area. Even with all this coloring, I did keep my marker pull pretty low. I didn't have that many necessarily for this project. I know sometimes in the past when I've done cards like this that have many images and lots of things to color, sometimes it can get really crazy with the amount of markers used. I tried to keep it kind of small, and I just used those markers for multiple things. So red for the schoolhouse and the firehouse, chimneys on the houses, hearts, the fire hydrant, things like that. Kept those all the same red colors. I didn't mix up with anything else. The most shades in one color I used is probably cool gray, where I had cool gray 2, 4, 5, and 7, and just kind of used those differently throughout. We've got a couple shades of yellow, green, brown, a blue combination that's darker, what I used for the house, a blue combination I used for all the windows in everything, vehicles and buildings, and a aqua color combination, and orange, and pink. So kind of all the colors, I tried to keep it with all the colors of the rainbow, and you'll see that maybe when I get the images laid out. Another thing I want to note is when I laid out my images to stamp, I left plenty of room between the images, and that was very purposeful. That was so when I take my Village Heroes and Happy Village dies, I can tape them all in place around all of these images and run them through my die cutting machine with one pass of the machine. So my goal was to just die cut once, not be having to crank through the machine or run it through a die cut machine over and over. Just one pass and I'd have the majority of the images. Of course, I did go back and add a few additional ones, but whenever possible, I love to be able to do that. I've also stamped those trees multiple times. Trees are one of those things that I think really help tie together the scene really nicely. Any accessory images. That is the clouds, trees, stoplights, signs, little fence images, anything like that. The fire hydrant. Those are all fantastic for kind of helping round out and break up the buildings and the vehicles. We'll color in these last couple, and then I will take all of the dies that coordinate with these images, tape them in place with a little low tack repositionable tape, and run them through my Spellbinders Platinum die cutting machine. And then I'll pop them all out, and we're going to start placing all of these where I think they want to go. I want them to go, and then I can go back and find additional images if needed, which I will find a couple more that I want to fill in and round out the scene. So here we have a good sampling of the images plus the ice cream truck. And this is where I'm kind of hiding the seam in the road. So the truck kind of covers up the majority of that, which is fantastic. I've already glued down in place a lot of the images. I've stamped and colored additional trees, and I'm simply positioning everything along those borders to fill it all in. I really love how all the little trees and things fit along the background of the card, and then also down along the bottom edge, kind of leading into our sentiment. Find a couple more places for trees and things. I'm using liquid adhesive to glue all of these in place. These are all fairly small images, and I found it was easiest to adhere them with liquid glue. In the Village Heroes stamp set, there's also lots of small phrases, imagery, and things like that. I customized the sign with crossing, and then I can glue that in place on my card. I love that you can customize the sign. It doesn't have to be a certain way. And then one of my favorite things about the Village Heroes stamp set is that there's additional words. There's the siren sound word. It's in a word. Beep, honk, and then like the little lines coming out like a flashing light for the emergency light, and you could do that on any of the vehicles that you want. So I'm going to add a few of those things just to kind of round out the design. There's a large and a small smiley face. I'm going to add the small smiley face to the sunshine there, kind of peeking out behind the trees in the fire station. And all of these little things just kind of help tie in the scene and really make it, even though it's not interactive, it gives it more of that interactive feel and really are fun. This little dog, as I mentioned early in the video, is actually from Tiny Christmas. Tiny Halloween has a cat, so if you would want to do a cat instead, I think that would be really fun. They're really super teeny tiny, and it's the perfect little finishing touch to pop there by the crossing sign. we will die cut this and adhere it to our card, and then place this whole card panel on a 3.5 by 8.5 card base. For my second card, it's very similar to the first, except that we're creating the background using the small slimline with lift the flaps rectangle. So it also has this lift the flaps piece and then some shape pieces. I'm not going to use those. I'm actually just going to use the rectangle, which is slightly smaller than the 3.5 by 8.5 size, meaning I'm going to have a nice white border or whatever card base color you're using all the way around. It's just going to kind of shrink in and make the scene a little smaller. I'm going to die cut the borders with the slimline stitched hillside borders again. And I've also die cut a road, this time with the simple road border. And I'm going to position it just kind of on the right side of the card so that I can position the car critter's car on this. So I want to lay it out first, kind of gauge where my car is going to go, gauge where my sentiment's going to go, and then glue it in place so that the two ends hang off of the right side and the bottom. That is going to allow me to trim off the excess. I am then going to build other little scenes throughout this card design. It's not going to be quite as full as the first card, but it's going to have like a little neighborhood. It's going to have a car in the background, additional trees, and then the cloud and the sunshine. But the focal point is going to be our car critters card, or image, pardon me. I love this. It is so cute. You can customize it. It works with the reveal wheel, so if you want to do an interactive design, you can do that with it. You can use it like I did here for a more traditional card. I will be sharing cards created in the reveal wheel style with this, so definitely stay tuned for that coming in the next week or so. Really, really versatile, fun, cute stamp set. So even though this is a different size image, I am pairing it with village images. And how I'm doing that is I'm creating that background. We've got our borders, we've got the sky, and then I'm building the road and that car are going to be in the forefront. And then our little images are all going to be kind of in the background, so they're going to be further back, if that makes sense, and small. Just like I did with the first card, I want to stamp my greetings. These are from the Car Critters stamp set. They're in the bottom right on my card front using clear embossing ink and heat embossing with white embossing powder. I use two phrases here, thanks for steering me, and then in the right direction. And I'm actually going to use the third phrase on the inside of the card, which I'll show you here in a little bit at the end of the video. Now that we have our sentiment and we're heat setting it, we're going to let that cool, wipe away any of the powder, and then we're going to glue our road in place. I really wanted the right edge to go all the way off, and I noticed after I adhered it, it didn't quite work. I did trim off that excess, so I'm going to kind of shift it and move it. I had to use a little undo to lift that up, but I will fix it without having to start over. Then off camera, I stamped images from Happy Village and Car Critters, and I'm going to color them in just like I did before. And this time I started with a lot less images than what I'm going to need. I started out, I knew I was going to use the car, I knew I was going to use these two particular critter images and some trees and then the village. I'm going to go back and find more clouds. I'm going to stamp many more trees, the fence image, and I think that's it. Or no, the car and the packages. because I really wanted to have something clear back in the background. I loved how the little neighborhood was coming together and all the little trees and such, but I love that little car, and it actually is going to work out super great because I can use the recalculating phrase from the Car Critter stamp set, which I think is super, super cute, and you'll see that here in a minute. The car is very fun to color. One great thing about the car, you can die cut the window from the car, which is what I'm going to do today, and then I'll die cut each individual critter and pop them inside. You can also not die cut the inside window of the car and just stamp those critters and color them, and it could just be a single piece, and die cut the outline. You'll definitely want to use the window if you're going to be making a reveal wheel card with this. So it's really versatile. I can't wait to see what you guys all do with this stamp set. It's a really, really good one and super fun to play with. I have also purposely picked the group of houses from Happy Village that's the trio of houses rather than individual house images that I'm going to group together. And that's because it just kind of eliminates a little step as far as having to die cut each individual image. This is one die cut and it gives you that group of houses. I'm using all the same marker colors that I used for the first card. And I'll just finish coloring these in before I go ahead and die cut these images. And I decided to do kind of rainbow, or at least try to hit most of the colors for my little house grouping. So the tops of the houses, the doors, and the house exterior all be different colors. Just kind of bright and colorful. Before I die cut the Car Critters car, you can customize the license plate on the front of the car. There's several phrases. You are great, great dad, I think, and the I love you, which I'm using, or just some little lines if you want to use a basic and not add an extra sentiment there. I'm using I love you, and I stamped it with clear embossing ink, and I'm heat embossing with white embossing powder. I love that there's all of those extra little touches that Lawn Fawn is so great at. So you can totally have fun with that and customize that. So let's go ahead and take our original images and glue them in place. Something I found with the car is that when I went to glue it, the bottom part of the car is on 4 layers of cardstock, and then the top is on that background, and it's not going to lay very nice. So I took a thin piece of foam adhesive and wrapped that just around that top area of the car, and it's going to make the car lie so much nicer. And then I will pop up the bears, the driver and the bear holding the map, with a little foam adhesive square as well. So just the top part of this design with the bears and the top of the car are popped up with foam adhesive. We're going to build our neighborhood here over to the left with our little trio of houses and then some trees. And we'll come back to this and add a little fence and another tree. We'll have some clouds up in the sky. Now that I kind of see where my holes are and what I'm missing, I can go back and stamp some additional images, color them, and die cut them to add to the card. So definitely you can see up in the sky, it needs something. I'm going to add the cute little car with the load of boxes on top. We have another little cloud, another big cloud, lots of additional trees, and then the fence right there by that trio of houses. By tucking the trees and things there along the back, it just reinforces that all of that stuff is off in the distance with the cute car critters card in the foreground. So here are just a few little extra touches. I'm going to use a little crystal lacquer for the headlights, so those are nice and shiny and raised. We will adhere this whole panel to a white card base. Again, the card base is going to measure 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. That's a 7-inch panel by 8.5, and then scored along the 7-inch side at the 3.5-inch mark to make the card base. I'm using a black glazed pen to add detail to the eyes and noses of the doors and then the bears. And then we're going to take the little recalculating stamp and have it coming out the exhaust of the little car in the background. Now the cloud, the packages, and sun can all stick up above this rectangle because remember, this rectangle is smaller than our card base, so we aren't going to have to trim any of that away. On the inside of the card, I'm going to stamp that remaining sentiment from Car Critters that says, "I'd be lost without you," using a little black ink. That's going to finish off the second long and skinny card design. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these 2 Slimline Landscape Village cards featuring brand new stamps and dies from Lawn Fawn. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Lawn Fawn stamps and dies that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.